I'm so happy to see you on that last one, or your name at least on the last one. So.
No, it's so good to see you.
Yeah.
Hi, John Paul.
Hello, how are you?
Good. Thanks for letting me sit in.
Of course. All right. Looks like we've got the YouTube deal figured out.
I'm so happy to see you on that last one, or your name at least on the last one. So.
No, it's so good to see you.
That's a little bit of a delay that's coming in.
Yeah, that was weird. Thanks for letting me sit in.
Of course. All right. Looks like we've got. Okay, I have now muted the stream that Zoom has pulled up, but you guys should still be able to hear me, and I should be able to hear you still.
Yep, sounds good.
Yep.
Okay, excellent.
All good.
Welcome to anybody who is joining us on the YouTube stream. Welcome and thanks for watching. We've got Jack joining and Diami. Hi, Jack. Welcome.
Hi, John Paul. Good afternoon, everyone.
Hey, Jack.
So Megan, this is the first STIA meeting that you're attending. Is that right? All right. Good to have you on. Where in the county do
Sorry
you work?
about that. Yes.
What's your role with the county?
So I'm the staff assistant for Commissioner Jerry Willie, and then also Pam Treese.
Okay, wonderful. And that's a new position. Is that correct?
There was somebody before me for the last couple. So I don't know if you worked with Alex.
Right. Yes.
yeah.
That's what I was
Yeah.
going with that. Okay. Wonderful. It was taking me a minute to connect the dots there. We got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to wait just another minute here. I'm just getting the link out to a person or two who's requesting it and not seeing it on the calendar invite or the agenda. Dennis, your meeting, of course, just to let you know, just getting the link to Lisa in a better format for her. So I expect her to be on it any minute here. Rihanna, I'm really glad to have some time on the calendar with you in the not too distant future. Thank you for that.
Yes, look forward to connecting. Thank you.
Was Mrs. Fingers.
Yay.
Yay.
Hi, Lisa. Welcome.
Hi, you guys. Sorry, it was embedded like an image. It wouldn't let me link it. I'm like, what?
Yeah, I noticed it looked a little funny too. Sorry, that was an issue.
No, it's totally good. I should have checked it earlier. Good to see you guys. I can't see it, John Paul. What is that, Giles? Oh, from your donation.
It's a letter from you.
It's the sticker.
Yeah.
Oh,
metal
yeah.
art.
Nice.
Thanks for
Thank
that.
you. Thank you.
I got it in the mail like, oh, I know her.
Thank you. You must have given us a donation on a reservation. Doesn't matter. Every little bit helps. All right. You didn't start and finish the meeting without me, Peter?
Nope.
But you found the mute button. Look at that.
Yeah, I'm tired of hearing people tell me I'm on mute.
Awesome. All right. Well, do we have everybody?
Not
I
everyone,
think
but
so.
I think we can probably start.
Okay, well, why don't we go ahead and start, and we'll welcome to the Salmonberry Trail Interagency Alliance meeting. And I think I know, well, Megan, we might do quick introductions because Megan probably doesn't know everybody, and it'll be good to, I'm Lisa Sumption. I'm the Director at Oregon Parks and Recreation Department and the co-convener of the Salmonberry Trail Interagency. And John Paul, you want to go next? I can see you.
Absolutely. I am John Paul Bowles, the interim executive director for the Salmonberry Trail Foundation.
Sean? Sean, you want to go?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Sean Morford. I'm the Executive Director of the Tillamook Forest Heritage Trust.
Nice, thank you. Commissioner Scar.
Hello, Commissioner Erin Scar of Tillamook County.
Nice to see you. Dennis.
Hi, I'm Dennis Wiley. I'm the outgoing Salmonberry Trail Project Manager.
I just won't let him go out.
People will believe you if you say it often enough, Dennis.
He keeps trying, but it's like, yeah, he is outgoing and very social, but not going out yet. And Michelle.
I'm Michelle Bradley, Port of Tillamook Bay General Manager.
Nice, in the office even, yay. Giles.
Giles Rickett, Salmonberry Trail Foundation Board Chair. Hello.
Nice. Megan.
Hi, Megan McKibben, Commissioner Jerry Willey's assistant.
Jerry couldn't join us today. Thanks, Megan. Jennifer.
Hi, good afternoon. Jennifer Purcell. I'm the Governor's Regional Solutions Coordinator on the North Coast in Tillamook, Clatsop, and Columbia counties.
Nice. Jack.
Jack Mulder, Port of Tillamook Bay Commissioner and Commission President.
Brianna.
Hi, thank you. Rehana Ansari, the Governor's Regional Solutions Coordinator for the Tri-County Metro region covering Clackamas, Multnomah, and Washington counties.
And Peter. Peter is are you in the office?
You bet. I'm actually really in the office.
I'll say, because Peter
Peter
has the coolest office in state government.
Yeah, particularly if you like wood. So I'm Peter Doherty. I'm the Oregon State Forester and also a co-convener of STIA.
Thanks, Peter. Mike, I can almost see you in the trees. It's all shadow, but.
Sorry, thank you. Lisa, this is Mike Cafaretta, Oregon Department of Forestry, Forest Grove District Forester.
Nice. Diami.
Morning, everybody. Diami Valentine, Senior Transportation Planner with Washington County.
Nice. And Carolyn.
Hello, everybody. And I am in the office too.
Yay.
Yay. Washington County Visitors Association.
Nice.
Thank you.
All right, thanks you guys. I think we have everybody now. So we will, I guess there's a little bit of an adjustment to the agenda that Dennis and John Paul don't even know, because Jennifer and I had a quick lunchtime conversation. And so we're gonna go into the agenda and have the conversation about the Salmonberry Trail Foundation. But I think it has occurred to all of us over the last couple of meetings that we have moved fast and furious on our strategic plan. And then we had this great big global pandemic, and a lot of things have happened and changed the world since we first started that strategic plan. And I don't think we've revisited it. We keep talking about, we've arrived where we want to be, and we're pushing really hard to move towards the foundation kind of taking over the reins here, and then talking about roles and responsibilities and what does STIA still do and what does STF do. And I think there's still some confusion in that arena. And so Jennifer and I were talking really quickly at lunch, and sorry, Jennifer, to throw you there, but we're talking about, and John Paul suggested the same thing, seeing if maybe we could have Resurrect Pete or maybe somebody from Oregon Solutions to come back in and just kind of revisit the conversation around our strategic plan and our goals, and help us get better definition around roles and responsibilities as we're moving forward here, and make sure that we have a good bridge transition plan. And Jennifer was going to reach out here a few minutes ago to see if that's even a reality. So Jennifer, can I throw to you?
I asked you to throw me gently. I did reach out to Oregon Solutions. I was not able to connect with them before today's meeting, but as Lisa mentioned, just had some questions about the opportunity to revisit the strategic plan. I don't know how many of you have looked at it recently, but I decided to look at it before today's meeting and was just reminded how much the universe has changed since we worked on that better than 2 years ago, or just about 2 years ago, and had suggested that maybe we think about updating it, and as part of that, thinking about what the organizational plan is for managing the transition to project implementation, and bridging that gap between STIA and STF. And I don't know that we'll have time today to talk a lot about organizational structure and strategy. I think today's conversation is more focused on budget, but I think it's probably worthy of an ongoing dialogue.
Yeah, so we just wanted to throw it on the table, not topic for today, but it just seems like even for those of us that were here for the strategic planning conversation, it would be a good reminder, and then recognizing there are new people at the table that didn't go through that exercise with us, and the world has changed completely since that time, so that it might be a good opportunity for us to make sure that we have that clarity. And so just wanted to throw that out to see if other folks are interested in us pursuing that conversation and creating that space for STIA and STF to do that together.
And Lisa, maybe I can follow up with you after I get more information from Oregon Solutions, and if we can make some space at the May board meeting to talk about it more specifically. If folks don't have thoughts, given that we're just springing this on them.
Exactly.
This can be a bit of a quiet crowd, Jennifer. I'll chime in. I think that could be, I think it could be helpful. I think having a really nice feedback loop between STF and STIA would be very beneficial, and tie some conversations together. I also am aware that there's probably some planning fatigue with everybody involved in the Salmonberry, given the planning we do at multiple levels. So, want to acknowledge that as well, but think, with some really specific parameters and outcomes, be a very healthy exercise.
Yeah, I think the bigger piece was, just making sure, as we've arrived in some places, and I don't think we have really spent a lot of time talking about roles and responsibilities and what's going to land in each other's lanes. And I think getting that clarity for all of us so that we were kind of on the same page would be super helpful. But So Jennifer and I will take that and we'll start working towards something for the May, or maybe even the one after. It doesn't have to be a big hurry, but we just want to see if there was any general interest in having that dialogue, which I think it would make us all in a little bit healthier spot. So are there thumbs up? You want to think about having something like that? Okay. Okay, perfect. Then I will take the agenda back over to, I think we're then at 3 with, if nobody else has any other agenda adjustments.
Just that there won't be any public comment. We have not received any.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And so then I will hand it over to, it looks like John Paul.
Great. Well, before I get into an overview of strategy, I want to make sure everybody has heard the good news that STF has been awarded capacity funding for a development director from the MJ Murdoch Charitable Trust. So that's a really big step for us and something that's been on the horizon for quite a while. We also...
That's like a big... Judges are quiet, sorry.
That's great. We also received a small in comparison grant from Travel Oregon, which is focused on building our stewardship and DEI programming. And I'm really excited about that and getting to work on it. And I'll talk through how that ties into our strategy as an organization in the short term. Just as a quick reminder, the capacity funding from Murdoch is over 3 years, fully funded in year 1, 2/3 funded in year 2, and 1/3 funded in year 3. So it is an incredibly helpful grant for us. It is also by no means a silver bullet. It doesn't cover operational funding for the organization, the executive director role, any other costs not associated specifically with that role. And of course, has the expectation of us being able to fund not only the rest of that position's salary as the Murdoch funding sunsets, but to be able to fund and support an ecosystem for the foundation for that person to operate in continuously. So a helpful booster shot, certainly, and plenty of work for us to do. All right, with that said, I'm going to pull up an overview of the strategy that I have largely been operating under and what I believe is really inherent to the trail success, to the foundation success over the next few months. I will skip through a couple of these introductory slides since you guys are well aware of a lot of it. Essentially what I am proposing, what we are proposing, excuse me guys, let me catch the slides up and I'll stop clicking. Great. All right. We need to prove value to our county partners and agency partners. And part of the way that we can do that is to bring in trails funding from state and federal programs. Essentially, we as an organization are looking to STIA as partners in capacity. So we need to be very clear about how we're adding value to you all and others and be pursuing priorities that are going to be wins not only for the organization and the trail, but for our partners as well. The middle third of the strategy is around stabilizing our organization, and that has to do with funding and culture. A few folks have been working very hard on this for a very long time, and that's a really wonderful thing. We are at an inflection point now where this effort and the stewardship of the effort broadens out from the folks who have been incubating it, holding it, creating it. We also need to seek out and listen to technical expertise and outside perspectives. And I think the idea of this feedback loop and forming conversations between STIA and STF could be a very helpful mechanism in that regard. To have increasingly a collaborative, respectful, open culture as an organization. And we need to diversify our board. And that diversification is in many aspects. And then finally, we need to engage the public and continue to build support for this trail. And I think there's been a lot of conversation around the cadence and timing of these efforts. So I'd like to go into a little bit more detail on each one. The audience for this trail I see expanding in a really wonderful way. I think there's always some challenges when an initiative like this, or a new business or a brand goes through some metamorphosis and really finds footing and broadens its perspective. So in some ways it makes it challenging to speak as directly to certain types of stakeholders or audiences. On the other hand, opens up a whole lot of opportunity to new potential supporters. So in terms of our value right now as an organization, the mission and vision of the trail is certainly inherently valuable. It's also not fresh. So we need to be articulating how we can bring in trails funding from new sources. How are we going to take any funding that's provided from STIA, from Washington and Tillamook counties, and be stewards of that funding, leverage it heavily, and bring in a lot more money than that to build a trail. We also have an opportunity to build community. This is the fun, exciting part. And we can do that through programming even before the trail is built. And that programming will center again around stewardship and diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then we can grow public support, which in my strong opinion belongs here towards the bottom, so that as we are achieving outcomes around those other 3 points, we're building support around activities and successes. So again, we're at an inflection point right now. We have transitions that are happening, and I think we need to really embrace it as an opportunity to get a whole lot more people under the tent than have been historically. Due to Dennis's work in parametrics and Tillamook County and the Washington County Visitors Association funding, the planning is complete. And again, that's a wonderful benchmark for an inflection point. And my intent is to honor those past investments by implementing this model that shows that we can bring in additional outside funding to build now that we have those plans in place. It's also an important time to affirm direction and create alignment. So Jennifer and Lisa, thanks for starting our conversation off there. I think that is relevant to STIA to STF and the relationship between STIA and STF, as well as all of these external partners. We also need to build on and leverage the Murdoch Award that'll bring in a development director for us, and leverage the funds and relationships that are at the table right now. In other words, it's a good time to fly, and it's time to take some big steps to get out and make that happen. I have put a good bit of my time in this role in trying to build confidence around a model for STF as a convener, facilitator, and developer of proposals. And we were able to pilot that process with the Community Paths ODOT funding. There are certainly ways we can improve that process, but I see it as a really big success, whether we receive those funds or not. It was a wonderful lesson learned for me in engaging all of the support that is available through the regional solutions team on the North Coast. And I look forward to building that with Rihanna and her team as well, and assembling proposal teams that were incredibly competitive. We're able to take the work that's been done on trail segments, identify the best candidate for the funding opportunity, and then again have those agency perspectives around the table developing a proposal, as well as the right local stakeholders from the county, municipality, watershed, scenic railroad. So really assembling essentially dream teams to develop these proposals. There's certainly a role for convening. It was confirming to have conversations with some folks who were aware of these opportunities, but didn't have the capacity internally. So me being empowered to help pull those teams together, have the conversations around how we develop cash match and who commits that, the role that different people will play in both developing the proposal and implementation, going out and finding the right technical inputs if we didn't have them around the table already, and then submitting those proposals. So I believe this is a formula that will build on the inflection point that we're at now. It will honor the investments that have been made by Carolyn and Tillamook County and others, and demonstrate that with capacity funding, we can well outstrip the dollars that we absorb as an organization in dollars that we're able to help bring in and hit the ground. In some cases, STF might be the fiscal agent for these projects. In others, there might be another more appropriate fiscal agent. So for example, if a safe routes to school, if and when safe routes to school opportunity comes up again, and Rockaway is the right candidate for that. Having the early conversations around who would be lead, who would be fiscal agent, where the cash match funding comes from, etc. And then us having a role as an organization in administering those projects once funds are brought in. So a lot of this to say is it's based largely, I think, off of some of the work that Dennis has done with parametrics. Maybe a difference being for the funding coming in directly from STIA members, and this looking at, basically a directory of funding types that we can pursue. And then I think it behooves us to also ask you all as partners in the counties, how else can we as an organization add value? Both Washington and Tillamook counties had proposals for trails coordinators on the table last year that weren't funded. Is there a role that STF can play that is helpful in tying together broader conversations with the Salmonberry as a backbone? I've been doing some convening work on the Metro Quarterly Trails Forum. Is that a helpful role for our partners internally, and is something we might look at expanding? And then also, looking at, especially now that we have MRDOC funding, having the capacity to really engage potential private funding through corporate partnerships, a donor engagement and development strategy. I think we have a real a bias towards a need to get on the ground as soon as we can. And I think it would really behoove us to invest in land use planning in Washington County as soon as we can, and really start more conversations about operations and maintenance in earnest, even if those are interim or for specific sections of the trail rather than as a through hike. If we're able to get trail on the ground, even if it is soft surface and not what we're aiming for in the long term, I think it's going to go a whole lot way in helping us build public and even political support. And I think that an interim soft surface solution might be feasible. I know that Dennis and Parametrics have done a lot of work, and we know that in some cases paving is not much more expensive than packed gravel. But essentially here saying, where can we look for places to get on the ground sooner than later, even if all it opens up is a 3-mile out and back hike, but putting an experience on the ground to the idea of the Salmonberry. We have a wonderful roster of volunteers who are looking for opportunities to engage in the project. So we can get folks out on the trail and brush, even if the trail is not open, even before we're at a place with O&M agreements and getting people out, we can mobilize those volunteers to remove some of that brush and help make sure that the infrastructure isn't further devalued. And then while we're doing this, continue that cycle of looking for funding opportunities for sections of the trail, bringing in the higher level state and federal funding for trails development, and working on this thing one at a time. So in addition to building trail, this is an opportunity for us to build programming, and stewardship is a really wonderful opportunity. One of the, obviously it's a challenge to really build the enthusiasm around the trail when we can't let people go hike on it. But an experience with a stewardship event is really wonderful exposure to the concept, and the idea of this trail really sells itself once you're there and you see how beautiful it is, particularly in certain sections. Stewardship has also come up as an opportunity for us to create meaningful DEI programming. And I think maybe I'd mentioned before, we were fortunate to have some representatives of communities of color in Washington County out on the trail over the summer. And one of their recommendations was to have really intentionally, for lack of a better word, integrated stewardship events where people of different colors and background experiences in the outdoors are coming together and kind of normalizing outdoor experiences together. And there's, of course, opportunity for us to tell the story of the trail through interpretation. In terms of building capacity for the organization to deliver on these things, I think STF needs to have a staffing plan that accompanies these new funds for a development director, as well as a staffing plan for a full-time executive director, and have really aligned agreements on what initiatives are being focused on, especially as that capacity is building. part of having a full-time executive director and implementing a strategy like this is the diversification of income streams. It's one thing for us to come to, particularly in this case, Washington and Tillamook counties and ask for funding. Another thing for us to ask for funding and then show our plan for generating more income from more diverse sources, so that not only is their money leveraged, but we are increasingly a healthy organization to where any one income stream can't, is not a make or break organizationally, operationally in terms of funding. I think in terms of timing and cadence, it would make a lot of sense to hire a full-time ED and then do the readiness for the development director, and then eventually staffing up into a construction manager who would have a lot of the touches in terms of developing and implementing projects that are awarded through those state and federal funding opportunities. So a little peek behind the curtain of what gives me confidence in the model of pursuing infrastructure funds for the trail and planning refinement funds. The spreadsheet to the left is something that tracks different sections of the Oregon Coast Trail and gets very specific on the elements and needs in those sections. And this is something that has come out from ODOT Active Transportation. On the right is a funding map, a funding calendar, essentially, that I've used for my business and think would apply very well here, where we can have down the funding opportunities germane to the trail, whether that is an ODOT Community Pass Fund, Safe Routes to School, Recreational Trails Program, private foundation funding. So essentially mapping out the work that we have to do on one hand and pairing that with funding opportunities that come up throughout the year. So as we wrap up here, I think we are in position to be incredible stewards of funding if we can get this to-do list of things done, which we are and will. Not only building an iconic trail, but doing that with public support as we onboard a development director and get to the infrastructure phase, which will be much more compelling for private funding. But also demonstrating some technical competency that helps bring in the public funds that I keep referencing to. And part of that is an ongoing conversation with you all as partners and with the agencies and Regional Solutions as a conduit for those conversations, so that the projects that we're working on are wins for them as well. A really good example of this is the section between Garibaldi and Barview, and ODOT having an understanding that they need to address stability of that cliffside regardless. So it was wonderful to have Jay involved in the proposal development process through North Coast Regional Solutions, and then get some extra ODOT attention on that as well, and hear from them that this was a priority for them and that somebody being a bit of a squeaky wheel or doing some work on it was going to help marshal some internal resources as well. And then, of course, there are the economic development implications in the long term of growing the tax base through TLT and other types of funding. And again, in a very exciting way, an opportunity to really build community as we build trail. I'm gonna skip through some of this so that we can have some conversation if you guys are interested, but essentially there are a lot of things that tee the initiative up for success, and a lot of those relationships are represented around the trail. I remember having a conversation with Jennifer pretty early on, and her very softly indicating to me that there were probably some ways that I could better use and leverage support from Regional Solutions. And through her patience and guidance, I think I've come to understand that better. And I'm incredibly optimistic about the heads and hearts we get to have around a table together to pursue resources for this project. And again, completing planning now is a really big opportunity to do some things on the ground and really build support. So quick pause here. I want to speak to the idea of public engagement and support, which is a very important thing. And I do realize that. One of the challenges that STF faces as an organization is that some of the initial kind of enthusiasm for the concept of this trail has burned off, which is very natural. And, there's no, I think it's just a natural thing. People hear about this incredible project and they're not generally inclined to attend STIA meetings or, understand the strategic planning conversations that need to happen and all of the work that goes into the planning work that was just completed. What I've got up here are metrics from our social media, from the STF Facebook account. And what they tell us is that when we post something nice about the trail, we're talking to our audience and we have pretty limited engagement. However, when somebody else posts about the trail, that gets a whole lot of reach and a whole lot of shares. And what that means is we need to have news to be communicating to build public support. So acting on this strategy, building programming, building trail is really central to building that public engagement and support. And I think we might need to do a little myth dispelling around the idea that if we just talk about it enough in glowing enough terms, then we'll build a huge constituency of supporters that will turn the tide in terms of politics and funding. We can certainly get there, but there's some work that we need to do. And then finally, in terms of the organization and its readiness, I take very seriously the stewardship of public funding. And so, continuing to build partnerships and methods for transparency and feedback loops is really important in this stage of the organization's growth. We need to embrace this transition of change, seek new perspectives and new user types. We need to diversify our board of directors, and that includes gender and ethnicity and race, but also user types and where those people live, specifically having more voices and perspectives representing Tillamook County. We need to tie together that conversation on how we're defining success in this relationship, not only between STIA and STF, but also as STF implements. What is our shared definition of success and how are we measuring that? And how can we increase transparency and make it an ongoing conversation? And part of that, of course, will be more dialogue and involvement with many of you and those agency partners as well. It's also very important to create a staffing plan so that we are able to continually build confidence in the organization's ability to implement capacity funding that we receive from STIA and Tillamook and Washington counties. Giles, over to you for any closing thoughts on what we've just gone over.
Yeah, great. Thanks, John Paul. Very, very well said, which leaves me little space to embroider on what you've already done. And for the sake of brevity, maybe I'll just a minute maybe. I think you hit it on the head, which is this effort has been broad and time consuming and at times feels a bit bureaucratic. But today, I think we stand at a brand new inflection point with the advent of the Murdoch support and the great work that's been completed on the planning. And I guess I just wanted to take a moment to pause, recognize that the STF is still a very young organization with a lot of growing to do and great big wide open ears for what our community needs from this effort. I think we're moving from kind of a contractually based opportunistic sort of an organization that was formed largely in response to Murdoch some time back. But here we find ourselves shifting gears to become legitimate organization with all the right foundation underneath it and endeavoring to have a broader paid staff and launch a more robust effort to make good on the promises and the expectations that are both on the trail and the foundation. So I want to thank and acknowledge certainly the use of the land, the first people who came before, certainly before all of us, and this great landscape and I want to also acknowledge the many, many people and the many hours and the many years that I think people have put both professionally into this, but also personally. Some people have been staff in their jobs and have sat in chairs to help out. Others have given up their own time in their free time. And I just want to acknowledge that we're gratefully standing on the shoulders of that collected immense effort, and take that responsibility with some serious reverence. So with that, like I said, an inflection point where the organization must adapt, grow, and gather momentum in terms of sophistication, process, accountability, and outreach. So that was a very long-winded way of saying, John Paul, yep, what you said. So thanks everybody. Appreciate this opportunity to be in front of you as always.
And I would appreciate your feedback, thoughts, affirmation, or constructive input into this strategy.
They are a quiet group, John Paul.
I'd like to respond to that. I think the note about broader participation from Tillamook County is very important. There are a lot of people that are excited about this, but except in official roles, and I'm certainly excited to have Michelle and Jennifer and Commissioner Scar and others from Tillamook County who have been involved. Commissioner Bartline, former Commissioner Bartline. I think we can do better in Tillamook County, and getting more representation, more on the ground excitement will be valuable. I know, John Paul, you're working on some of that, and I'm helping you with one of those pieces right now. I think that's a key area. There's been a concern from Tillamook County for many years that this would be sort of imposed on Tillamook County without input, or that even from those who are excited about it, that it would be built on the east side, but the west side would lag. And so again, Tillamook County wouldn't have input. So I think the more we can reach out and broaden user groups, the better for this overall effort. And not to say that we don't need to do the same thing on the east side as well. I think more inclusion, more voices, more support is a good thing for this effort.
Thanks, Jack.
Hey, John Paul. Yeah, it's Sean. So I wanted to just ask a little more detail on the Murdoch funding. What's the timing on that? And have you thought yet about what that person will be focusing on first?
The timing is fairly loose. The earliest that those funds would be available, from what we understand now, is in September. We just have the grant agreement just sent to us, so it's all very fresh. Yeah. So they're encouraging us to do it right and take our time. So I would recommend there be some joint conversations to answer the questions that you just asked, Sean. Mutual understanding of readiness. And then move forward in that regard. I would imagine, the title as we'd scoped it has been Development and Communications Director. I think we need to do some work on looking at our audience, defining them, and understanding who we are, who they are. And I think there's a pivot there. I can kind of see the evolution of this project through the last decade, and how that's really been a boon to it, and how those people have carried it. And then also potentially some assumptions that need to be revisited around who needs to be communicated to, what messages are compelling to them. And I would build development work based off of that, first laying the groundwork for audience identification and messaging.
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe I can build on that. There was a study that was completed many years ago. Now it feels like, because it was, specifically on this communications and how to peel apart our public and parties, and how to provide the right communication to each segment. So I think it's an excellent question, and dusting that off and probably updating it, I think, to John Paul's point about how the world has changed, how this project has changed, how perception has changed. It would behoove us to dust that off and update that prior to turning a development director loose.
And I think it goes to that earlier conversation, thanks for the nudge, Jennifer, of, we're at a pivotal moment where things really are transitioning in this new opportunity. And I think that clarity and bringing us all together to start talking about roles, responsibilities, common goals, desires, and kind of what that looks like. So that way we're in a position to support STF with what we ask them to carry out, but being much more clear about whose lane is what and how we're going to accomplish this and how do we support each other better. So it's a great time, actually.
So to add a layer for feedback, particularly the slides around how STF can and should add value to agency and county partners, I'd be interested to hear, especially if there are any assumptions there that may need to be checked. This is essentially the way that the pitch has been framed to Commissioner Scar and Willie and their colleagues on county commissions. And it is an attempt to respond to what I had been hearing when I stepped into this role a while ago, and the relationships I've cultivated since then. So any particular thoughts on the idea of STF as convening partners, proposal development, tracking funding opportunities for trails or active transportation development? Are we on the right path there?
So as a new person in this conversation, and not entirely clear where the STIA STF conversation has been and is going, what I've been communicating with John Paul, and so as a county commissioner, we've been talking about an ask in front of Tillamook County, and I have been asking very specifically what kind of money, what exactly is going to be achieved with this, what are the steps of STF to do so, as if STF were the organization with which we would be working going forward on the actual sort of, getting this thing on the ground. And I feel a little bit confused, to be quite honest, about the STIA STF conversation because I am new, because that seems to be to some degree the next thing on the agenda. So John Paul, I guess for me, I feel like I would love some clarity around that, and whether that's the next thing on the agenda or whether it's something you all know that I don't know yet. Exactly how is this going forward, so that I do know what message I would like you to deliver to our full Board of Commissioners to get, funding toward this project, and knowing that STF capacity building is the right funding going forward for this project, as opposed to potentially funding into STIA at a larger level because we're keeping the coordinator there, right? I just feel like in order to have the conversation I need the clarity.
Great. I would love to take a stab at very briefly answering that, and then getting any more comments, and then moving on to that conversation more fully. Does that work?
Sure.
My understanding of it, Commissioner, is that STF has, in its strategic plan, said that they are not an implementing body, and so are supported the creation of STF as the implementer of the trail to operate under that IGA with support from it. The financial support is a challenge right now, as we know. And so it has forced what I think is a very healthy conversation on what is the organization at its core at this point in history. And so the strategy that I've just presented is my articulation of what I have heard from stakeholders consistently over the last several months about the role that we can play that would make a compelling ask, particularly to Washington and Tillamook counties, as well as get nods and green lights from agencies. Any other thoughts, comments, feedback on the strategy presented before we move into the next conversation?
Well, and I would just affirm, Aaron, that's my understanding too, For a long time we had Tillamook Forest Heritage Trust, the organization that Sean is running, be the supporting, it's our supporting nonprofit for ODF recreation. And so we were using it for the trail for a long period of time. But as we took that on, there were concerns, that we're losing the focus on ODF, but there was also a recognition that in the long run, the supporting nonprofit, or as it turns out now, truly 501c eligible nonprofit, which was needed for some of the grants, was going to have to be stood up as an independent nonprofit and take over the role that the Tillamook Forest Heritage Trust. And so it almost seems like it was 2 years ago now, Sean, not quite.
Yeah, December of 2019.
Yep. And so we started putting together the plan to help create the Salmonberry Trust Foundation to take over that role. And Sean helped them get established, got the nonprofit status. There was lots of stuff going on, and we've in a sense completed that transition, and the focus of the Tillamook Forest Heritage Trust is now more centrally focused on recreation within and on state forests, and don't really have a role. While this was going on, it's just we were getting to the transition point. I do think that COVID disrupted everything and affected our ability to communicate and us to remember history. Now I haven't had it yet, but no, I haven't. And so I think we're having to kind of rebuild back up some institutional memory that we're now at the point where they need to go out and begin implementing as they can. And it is a pretty exciting point. We completed the final planning for all segments of the trail. We've completed all the stuff. STIA is really sort of the principle that set it up to become the what do they call that? The trail holder. We hold
leaseholder.
Leaseholder, but we were never envisioning ourselves to be implementers or builders, and now we're in a really good point where the Salmonberry Trust Foundation can make that. Did I get any of that wrong, Sean?
Peter, can I add to that a little bit? And I think bringing up the role of the Tillamook Forest Heritage Trust is a great one, and talking about that transition. It's easy to forget all the work that has been done already with the various planning steps in the different segments of the trail, and almost all of that money was run through the Tillamook Forest Heritage Trust. So the trust received the money and then dispersed the money out to parametrics and other consultants. Now, we also had a grant that went through Tillamook County for the brownfield study. So there were some other vehicles that were used. And I think there was one that went through the port for updating community transportation plans. But as that kind of happened, as the Tillamook Forest Heritage Trust was getting involved, and then we started to see all donations and kind of all activity run through the Tillamook Forest Heritage Trust. Then Peter talked about, the transition to Salmonberry Trail Foundation. And along with that, we have this broader inflection point of we have completed the planning elements, and now we're looking at building, right? And so not only do we have a transition in the nonprofit support, largely driven by the Murdoch grant, but we have a transition from planning to construction, and that in itself, whether it was the trust or the foundation doing it, just the mindset around building versus planning is different. And putting something real on the ground has different challenges than thinking about putting something on the ground in the future. So it's an interesting question that you have, Aaron, and it's nice to reflect on it in this case and think about what this all means and all the different changes that are going on right now.
No, that's super helpful, Jack and Peter and Sean, because that was even the quick dialogue I had with Carolyn a couple weeks ago, and then even with Jennifer today. It's like, even those of us that have been here, we haven't paused and really reflected on everything that we've done and how huge that was. And we had always envisioned that, I mean, because STIA was doing it all, right, with this partner who wasn't really our partner, but was willing to come to the table and change their mission and their purpose to be able to carry this legacy forward. I mean, this was really more, it was back when Doug and Tim were still sitting at the table. I mean, it wasn't even a Lisa and Peter show. I mean, we inherited and we were like, what is Sam? What are we doing? And why are we, or what? Can we do this? Can we be a STIA? And turns out you can. I mean, it's a different creative way to think about doing a legacy project, and also recognizing we didn't want to continue to do the bureaucratic things that we all do as organizations that are public facing. Like, we wanted to be more flexible and more agile and allow more partners to come to the table and figure out ways to actually accomplish this, rather than saying there's no way, it's too expensive, it's impossible, no one person can do it. And so the partnerships along the way have been super helpful to say, okay, the planning is done. That was the big heavy lift. Is now we have a roadmap, and it will change. Nature will take us on a ride that we weren't prepared for, which is how it even became a possibility, right? But at the same time, it was really clear in our strategic planning conversation of, STIA really does need to be the leaseholder. We need to be doing things like, what are the standards? What does signage look like? What does maintenance look like? What does trail look like? And be more of that higher level, this is the board that the partners who want to do that development and implementation will come to make sure that we're staying consistent and that it meets the goals and the desires of what that trail looks like when it's complete, right? But having a nonprofit arm that can go after other dollars, because relying on Tillamook County, Washington County Visitor Association, the port, and parks and forestry is not going to be sustainable. That's not how this is going to get done. We're going to have to be able to reach much broader and different, and they've already demonstrated in a very short time period that will be successful for us. And so that is that we're in this weird transition, Commissioner Clara. We haven't paused and checked the box to say, look at all we've done, and here's where we're going. And are we all still on the same page? And is it the right direction, or do we need to go a little left before we go all the way to the right? And what are those little last things we need to do to make sure that STF is going the right direction that we all want them to be? And it's great because for newer folks like you coming to the dialogue, you may have newer, different perspectives, and you have different issues at the county level that you have to deal with now, right? Than you did a year ago. COVID has changed a lot for a lot of our organizations. So I think it is, to your point, Jack, it is time for us to really reflect and acknowledge where we've been, and also recommit to where we're going, and that clarity of who is doing what, because you shouldn't be confused when you go to your commission to say, this is what we're going to do, and this is what it's going to support, and this is where the funds are going to go. We need to give you that confidence, and it keeps coming up in each meeting. So I do think whether it is Oregon Solutions or just us facilitating a conversation with each other with that strategic plan and making those adjustments, and then giving each other permission to start moving forward in the directions we want to go. And that means, STIA, we get to stop being in the weeds, stop trying to focus on the implementation, and let a partner who knows what they're doing start doing those things for us with the clear direction and guidance that we've worked so hard to give. So I think we're arriving there even without having to formally do it.
I appreciate all the work that's come before me coming into this chair, and I realize that the opportunity is in front of us to reflect and to redefine. And I hate to be the one pushing, but I do have to, for our budget process, there isn't time to wait for regional solutions and so forth, right? If we're going to request some significant TLT for some of the backbone funding that John Paul is suggesting, it puts us in kind of a funny position to go before the Board of Commissioners and say, well, we're determining the relationship, right? And we think we want you to give a significant amount of money to this organization, but we're reflecting. So I do want to just put that on the table today as well, in the interest of supporting there being funding. We do have a strong showing of TLT in Tillamook County. I think that there is a good possibility for us to put some funding into the foundation, and I want to be able to support that strongly by being able to say, yes, STIA is reflecting perhaps on the full partnership and exactly how it will roll forward. However, the commitment has been made to the foundation. The foundation is moving forward as John Paul has described it in these ways, convening partners, seeking funding. That is committed to by STIA. Maybe we're going to work out some details, but I guess for me, again, I just kind of feel like I need that. Yes, we're all on that path to sit in front of the Board of Commissioners and say, that is where the funding should go. STIA is not asking for that funding for themselves. They're asking that or the partnership is strong and we are ready to put it this direction. So I don't know if that is too much to ask on a short term.
No, actually,
our budget cycles among us is active.
That's perfect. You can say that we have a partnership agreement. We signed a partnership agreement with the Salmonberry Trail Foundation, and they're exercising it. And I think do you have a copy of that partnership agreement between STIA and, because
I don't think I have one I could lay my fingers on. I asked for all things STIA here, and that was not included in what came back to me.
Peter will ship it to you right now.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
So I mean, that's probably the bigger question in front of us, right? Like, I feel like as STIA members, we have already made this decision. This is our partner. We have already entered into an agreement. We've asked them to move forward with direction from us to be the implementers. We've said all along that's not where we're heading. So I think it would be fair for us to thumbs up, thumbs down that everybody is in agreement that that is what STIA's intent of STF is. I mean, we incepted them to do that, and it may be that we do need to go back and look at whether or not there are things that we want to change about some of the planning things or some of the, what their structure looks like or those things, but it's the intent of what they're going to accomplish for us and what their role is very clear at the higher level. We may need to make some adjustments around, or the little trail markers along the way, still the right markers, but the direction is the same. So maybe somebody can more eloquently put that into a motion of yes or no. And I thought some thumbs up, but I think STIA has already said STF is the implementer and is that right hand, and they are the ones that will do funding. Peter does not have capacity to even take the $3,000 from you guys to be able to, he'll never bill you. He won't have time. So, I mean, he's looking to STF to do those things like Sean did for us previously. It's the same, it's just the partner that we're building more intentionally. So,
and
yeah,
I can add that I think it's come in a couple of waves that maybe you guys have already identified. That the agreement came first, endorsing that STF was the 501c3 nonprofit that would do the fundraising and communications and so forth. And then the next wave of essentially put an exclamation point on that by more further defining the division of labor between STIA and STF, and that was put forth and then codified by the strategic plan that was developed now a year and a half ago, I think we said. So that was, maybe I'm starting to repeat what people have said already, but that was the way we saw that develop.
Is that sufficient affirmation, Commissioner, of at least a high level relationship?
It is, thank you. It makes it clear, because I don't want to be in a funny position where suddenly the city of Tillamook comes forward and says, no, we're doing the Salmonberry, we need the money, right? So it's just a commissioner clarity and understanding that we are, in our commitment to the trail, committing it in the correct direction.
And then to add, to underscore and bold the point you made earlier, Commissioner, the strategy that I just presented is essentially what I presented to Washington County in the ask for capacity funding. And that was well received, and we got a soft yes. So I took that as an indication that we're headed in the right direction. And socializing this strategy, hopefully in a very clear way today, is another step in, getting affirmation from STIA as a group that we are heading in the right direction. And quite frankly, I think Washington and Tillamook County's decision to fund or not is really the proof of whether this strategy is viable and bought into by everybody who's around the table here. Because to underscore it again, because the solution right now is not going to be the development director who goes out and gets private funding and solves all of our problems. We have the metrics that show us that we need something to talk about. And so solidifying these relationships around the table now with funding and implementing some trail related activities and programming, I wholeheartedly believe is absolutely essential to then going out and building more public support and private fundraising.
So Aaron, and for everybody else's, I posted the signed partnership agreement in the chat. So you should be able to open it up and save it. Took me a while to find it, sorry.
Well, thanks for that. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Peter, one of the things that I think about, the Tillamook Forest Heritage Trust Board is going through a process right now of looking at names and branding for the trust. And given that the trust now is statewide, we're looking at whether or not the Tillamook name is the right name. And I wonder, I'm just sort of thinking out loud, this is not this is just for discussion, but the word foundation may create a certain imagery around what the foundation does. And I don't know if I'm just gonna put that out there. You're chuckling, John Paul. Foundation sounds like you give money, and it sounds like it's all about fundraising. And we're asking a foundation to be a whole lot more than that. So I don't know, how do you communicate that, John Paul, with people that you talk with? Do you have to explain, well, the foundation is more than that, or?
Yeah, that's a great point to bring up, Sean. And I think that's probably a layer or two down. But yeah, I think it does sort of connotate that we have funds that we are looking to program through partners to achieve goals. And we're a bit the inverse of that, pursuing funds to implement those sections of the trail. And this is part of the reason I think that it's great for us to have this conversation on strategy right now. Is it's not hard to imagine 20, 30 years into the future where this is the Friends of Salmonberry Trail who ease the operational burden on state parks and forestry and act as a Friends of group. And in that regard, being a foundation makes a whole lot of sense. Because we would be dispersing that funding in a traditional Friends of model to trail stewardship and trail cleaning groups, and to a watershed council who's going to do some watershed protection work, and back into state parks and ODF to help fund some extra capacity for maintenance in the area. So yeah, and then here we are, let's rewind that back 20, 30 years, a fledgling organization who's saying, hey, listen, we don't have what compelling case enough to make to the public yet to get those dollars in to add up to, and we're not even talking about maintenance, we're talking about $150 million of funding. So that is a different role, and different nomenclature could certainly make sense around that. And then within that one level down, I am saying, hey, listen, as an organization, how do we add value? What makes us worth support? And in the case of the counties, worth financial support.
And at this point, I would just say, let's not change more names or anything else and not confuse it. Let's get solid on where we are.
I think it's more about just making sure that we communicate and with our, as Commissioner Scar goes back to talk to her colleagues, that question could come up. It's like, well, what is it? So being clear that it's bigger than what a typical foundation does at this point in this, at this point in the stage, you know, the life stage.
It also generally assumes that there is an endowment that the foundation both operates out of and gives funding for projects to partners from.
Not
here
yet.
we're asking for funds.
Well, that is the aspirational vision. We're
That's
not there yet.
That's right. That's right.
Nice. Well, I think we are in our next agenda item. I think we're way in the thick of it. Are there other questions for John Paul before we really get into the other budget conversation? And I think you guys made it a little bit easier because I mean, the dialogue that Peter and I really wanted to have is that clarity around the ask that's there, right? Because that $3,000 ask that we as partners have given has covered the STIA administrative costs, whether that's been legal or insurance. You know, it's a small, and some of the help to keep the meetings moving and things like that. And so that $3,000 has been there, but the ask for that is that it would be invoiced by STF, and they would be the ones then taking that money in and making sure that those things that are encumbered upon us are taken care of. The insurance gets paid, our legal bills get paid. John Paul will help take on some of the meeting roles and responsibilities, that kind of thing. So there's that piece. And then I think in addition, Peter posed the question of, to help support more, could we look at an up to 12.5. I'm going to get this right, Peter. I'm not going to take more of your money again today. Ask for up to 12.5 from other entities to help continue to fund some of the work to get us closer to implementation and development. So Peter, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, and so we had an original agreement on just the administrative cost, which was, as Lisa said, 3,000 per member, and that cost sharing or per STIA signee. And at that time, we did a I'm trying to think. Oh, that was the amendment. I was looking for the cost sharing. Oh no, it is the cost sharing MOU. So that was ODF, Parks, Tillamook County, Washington County Visitor Association, Confederated Tribe, and the Port of Tillamook Bay. And each party agreed to commit 3,000. And we talked about that at the last meeting. And most of those people, some of them had to check, but that was a question. And ODF will commit to that 3,000 for the administrative cost of running STIA. And so that was one question. And the other question was, and I think it got interpreted in two different ways. One, would you push that up by $9,000 to make it 12,000 to help in this capacity transition? And I think some of that was heard as, will you give $12,000, which then became 15,000 total. But my understanding, at least as Lisa and I remember, we had both agreed that we could support up to 12,500 total in a fiscal year to help with the bridge capacity funding till Murdoch solid in and can bring in some additional of that executive director capacity. I hope that was clear. And
So
again,
can I just, is that 3,000 per agency per fiscal year? What's that 3,000 window covering?
The three.
I'm trying to,
I think it's biennial. Dennis, help us.
no, we did it for whatever reason. We funded the administrative costs for STIA by calendar year, at least the first time.
Okay.
It was a calendar year.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so that was a calendar year. So they're asking it for the calendar year 2021.
Okay.
And that's just the administrative funding. Mike, you have your hand up. Sorry.
Oh, thanks, Peter. No, I was just going to offer for Aaron, this has been going on for a long time, right? And it started with sort of a leadership challenge. What do we do and should we do it? And that really, we've kind of crossed that bridge, right? We think we want a trail, we finished the planning. But a similar train on a similar tracks right next to the question of should we do it is how do we fund the day-to-day operations? And it's actually been different in my memory for the last 10 years. Every year has been different. 1 year, everybody's, Parks and ODF split it. Tillamook County, Washington County have contributed a lot. When it was Tillamook Forest Heritage Trust, a lot of the time was put forward by the Department of Forestry through Ross Holloway's time as the executive director, and it really wasn't billed out. It was just part of what he did, funded by ODF. And now that we're switching and saying, well, the leadership, none of this group independently can provide that leadership. We're giving it to the foundation. But then where's the funding come to have some solid leadership provided to us? And so I view this as sort of that backbone funding that before we were funding Dennis Wiley's position and we were funding Ross Holloway's. And now we're saying, well, we don't want to do it ourselves. We want the foundation to do it. And we're trying to split that up. And we're not quite sure how much it is and who's going to provide what, because we've never made it mandatory. It's always been optional. Each agency saying, we know this is important. It's kind of next to our mission. It's close to our mission. It is our mission. So it's just been a challenge every single year. If that helps, I don't know.
Well, it does. It helps explain why I can't find a record anywhere at the county that sort of says, here's how we do this. It's just kind of, here's 3,000, here's 200, here's, right? And everybody's like, I don't know, Bill just told us what he needed. So, so
it's
thank
been
you, Bill.
shoestring one thing at a time, laying this tracks, depending on who's got a little space or who's not really paying attention, and it happens to happen without us even noticing.
Sure, I just want to make sure that we're committing this year and into the future in the ways that we are supposed to be. So what I think I'm hearing is that at 3,000 ideally has been per calendar year, and previously it's gone to different places, but right now that is the 3,000 we're talking about going to the foundation from each of us, and the foundation will ensure that STIA's pieces stay afloat. And then if in addition to that, John Paul and I are able to come up with an agreement and the county wants to go deeper, they can do that. But this initial 3,000 would still be going to the foundation to pay expenses for STIA. Is that correct? These are the questions I've already had from my Board of Commissioners. They're very detail oriented, so I'm trying to get to the very specific, clear detail. So I apologize if it seems a little over anxious.
And maybe Dennis should answer that, but the 3,000 we just collected to pay for the legal bills and the insurance, and Oregon Solutions was a part of that too. So it wasn't staff funding at all. It was just the bills that came in.
Well,
so at our last STIA meeting, I thought we had talked about increasing the 3,000 to the 12,500 that Peter mentioned several minutes ago. And at that time, Commissioner Scar had asked for a piece of paper that said, here's what we're asking for, something that we could take back to our boards, whether it's the Board of Commissioners or the county commissioners or our port commissioners, and have a conversation about. So, just switching hats to the Port of Tillamook Bay Commission, we have supported the $3,000 amount each year. We had a conversation about renewing that. There's support for that. We had a conversation about increasing that to this larger amount. And the request was essentially what Commissioner Scar asked for at our last STIA meeting, which is, can we get a piece of paper that tells us what is the precise amount and what it's going to be used for and what the commitment is. So the Port of Tillamook Bay Commission is essentially waiting for that piece of paper that Commissioner Scar asked for last month, or whenever our meeting was, approximately, at our last STIA meeting.
Michelle?
Thank you, Peter. I just also, I don't want to muddy it up, but there's definitely, as those of us like Dennis and I that work on the ground, once we had that huge, heavy multi-year lift of getting the agreement in, and then everybody stepped back and said, oh, whew, that's done. Like we said, there was kind of a pause on everything. Per that agreement, Dennis and I have been the ones that have had to, anytime there's any activity on the rail line, he and I have to go back and forth and have that. So I just want to make sure that it's on everybody's mind moving forward, that there needs to be somebody in that position that has authority to be part of the STIA agreement that says, yes, this is a concern, no, there isn't a concern, per the STIA agreement with the court. So that to me is very different than insurance and legal stuff.
If I could just jump. Oh, go ahead, Giles.
And maybe you're going to answer this right after I say it, but there was sort of an element of not public outreach, but being liaison to public with lots of questions coming in and so forth. And there was an aspect of the work that looked like that too, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, indeed. So if everyone chipped in the 3,000, I think we came up with an $18,000 total. And of that $18,000, approximately 4,000 or so was for legal fees, as well as our insurance through the Special Districts of Oregon, Association of Oregon. And the remainder of the funds really just would provide some time for a staff person to be able to work with Michelle when there's conversations that need to happen regarding the right-of-way, as well as when the general public is asking questions about the Salmonberry Trail and other questions for STIA themselves, that we felt there was enough in that $18,000 that John Paul or whoever would have some funds to be able to work with to keep the STIA operation functioning.
And so it sounds like we have given information, but not summarized it. So it had that kind of clarity with a one pager to be able to give you, to be able to take to your boards. And that's what you need.
It would be super helpful for me because again, I'm working on a larger ask with John Paul, right? And the question is this inside that because it's going to the foundation and so it's a part of, or is it separate from that because it is a STIA piece that really doesn't touch the capacity of the foundation, and so that there are really two asks coming before the commissioners at this time. So is it one or is it two, and how much is each for its distinction?
What is it going to do? Yeah, no, that makes total
what's
sense.
it going to do? That would be super helpful.
Okay, I apologize. I thought we got there. I didn't realize we hadn't delivered that clarity.
No, and for me, part of it's because it's running around my head. I walked away from the last meeting thinking it was 18,000 from us, 3,000 for STIA and 15,000 for a coordinator. So I think there were a lot of interpretations out of the last meeting. So I just appreciate the time spent to get to clarity.
No, that's awesome. Thank you.
And Lisa, I'm wondering too if the STIA STF agreement, if it doesn't provide a little bit of clarity, it certainly doesn't detail the contribution amounts, but it does outline the roles and responsibilities enough that it might be a starting point in terms of a one pager to support board requests.
Yeah, and Jennifer, were you able to open the link that Peter sent? Can you do that?
No, but when I tried to save it, I found that I already had it. So I was able to look at it in my own files.
Yeah, I had to download it first and then I could open it. It wouldn't open it from the chat.
Okay. And mine won't let me download it. That's probably just my IT team. But we can certainly use that. So it brings that clarity and then it shows the role and responsibility and what we want. And then we'll actually bullet out exactly what each of those funds are going to purchase and who will be doing them, because there's confusion of when Dennis goes, which at some point I will let Dennis go, not right this second. But when he does, then who will do what Dennis is doing, right? And the intent has been that we would start moving all of that over to STF and have that that role and responsibility lie there, since they will actually be implementing and doing all the work on the ground. Okay, so we will get that out to you. We need to do that by like tomorrow. It shouldn't be that difficult. We already have most of it kind of already in a framework, but because that also puts you in a position today not to be able to tell us where you are financially. So that, I mean, we've got to get that out to you quickly and get that
Sure.
time.
Yeah. So I have, generally 3,000 seemed like a reasonable amount, although obviously we didn't vote on it. But I don't see that 3,000 as an issue. And then it's the next piece is John Paul is going to be doing a workshop with commissioners to talk about the bigger piece of this. So knowing whether that 3,000 is inside that or outside that will be helpful for that bigger conversation. But I think we can safely say the 3 is, is something people are comfortable with.
Yeah. And that covers, the basics, the meetings and the insurance and that kind of piece. But I mean, the bigger piece that we've got going on right now is how do we bridge this transition to get to a place where we have that other capacity funding to be able to keep things moving, and also recognizing this is a legacy project, right? I mean, it's going to be decades after us, but how do we get that bridge to the other side to keep us sustainable? Mike, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. I just put it in the chat, but maybe I'm wrong. Stop me if I'm wrong, but I think that $3,000 was for insurance and legal on STIA's behalf.
Right.
The other 15,000 we talked about was to support the leadership that was once done by our staff, Dennis, but we're transferring to the foundation. And so we were going to, we're trying to chip in some money to recognize that that the foundation is taking on some roles for STIA, once done by Dennis. But then, of course, additionally, that's not enough. If ODF and Parks and Tillamook County, Washington County each contribute 15,000, well, we still ask John Paul to go out and raise more money. Like that's not enough really to have a full-time executive director running a foundation and trying to do all these things. And so John's, I think, out there working, to fund the trail and to do these add capacity and bring value in addition to what we've already been doing. John Paul, stop me if I'm wrong there, but that's kind of where I think we're at.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I appreciate that. And just to underscore the reality here, I don't think that the right path for the foundation is to raise a few thousand a quarter from the public who is already engaged. We will be in a continuous cycle of incubation, and it's not going to break through. So again, the strategy that I'm proposing, particularly around adding value to you all as partners, is me looking for affirmation that we are poising ourselves as a worthwhile investment. Because quite frankly, if we're not a worthwhile investment to you all at a lower level right now, then we need to know that, and we need to be on a different path or sunset or go quiet for a while. And if we are, and that is affirmed not only in some capacity funding from this group to bridge a gap for us, it also leads to this group advocating on all of our behalf that both Washington and Tillamook counties buy into this. Then we have real traction and a trajectory and a chance at velocity. And we can engage the public better as we make progress and diversify our income streams and become more stable as an organization so that the effort is not entirely reliant on the folks around the table on this call.
Thanks. And Jennifer has her hand up. By my clock, we're getting to the end of the scheduled time. And I have a call with a representative from the legislature. So I am going to have to excuse myself. But what I've heard is Lisa and I will get together and send something out to all of you that clearly states what we were asking for and the expectation around that. And we'll get it out by close of business tomorrow. And Lisa, I'll try to set up a meeting with you early tomorrow morning sometime if that works for you. Great.
Perfect.
Thanks everyone for being here, and sorry to be having to jump off, but it's been one of those days back to back in Zoom or Teams. So hang in there. Thanks for all your support.
Peter.
Thanks, Peter.
Thank you. Okay, Jennifer, go ahead.
So I just don't want to lose track of, there's, in my mind, two conversations. One is the budget element and one is roles and responsibilities and organizational capacity. And I'm not sure if I've said this exactly, but I think at the heart of my concern and the idea about bringing in Organ Solutions to help us relook at that strategic plan is really that as we transition this implementation work to the foundation, making sure that they have the organizational capacity to be successful. We don't want to find ourselves in a place where we haven't managed this transition plan well. And I don't think that serves either of the organizations. And so when I think about the pieces of the puzzle, just the organizational management in and of itself, the development capacity and fundraising and friend raising that needs to happen, but also project management. John Paul's done a great job of looking for opportunities for implementation. And like any grant, the good news and the bad news is when you land that grant and what you do with it. And I don't want to set all of us up for a situation where we land a project and we don't have the capacity to implement it well and implement it successfully. So I think the budget piece is important, and we need to get some clarity around that. But I think particularly as John Paul and I have been working on some of the implementation pieces and catalyst projects, I just worry that if we land one of these projects, we need to make sure that we've shored up the organization in a way that we can be successful as we transition to implementation.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the struggle with the budget conversation, right? Is that the clarity around structure and roles and responsibilities is not obviously clear enough to have the confidence that we need together as two organizations that are integrated. So, Diane, you had your hand up right there.
Yeah, I wanted to echo kind of what you were communicating there, Jennifer, in terms of, the challenge. And I think to answer your first question, John Paul, in terms of are we seeing the value added portion in the foundation? I think, we at the county don't have the capacity to be able to prepare grants and do the project management for a large portion, for delivering a major project. And so we are really asking a lot of STF to do that heavy lifting. And so that's where, and I think, as John Paul mentioned, there was receptivity at the county to have STF provide that level of support. And so, I think there is, but if like this community paths funding comes through, for example, being able to deliver that project is going to require some major capacity and resources. And, these are all things that we need to work through, but I think STF can from the county standpoint, I think, and what we heard at the county, the board during the work session, is being able to get a little bit more concrete in terms of what that scope looks like from STF, and how you can have that capacity and resources available.
Thanks, Deanna.
Giles, you had your hand up as well. Sorry.
Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, real quick. I know we're running over. I just wanted to, I appreciate the conversation that's been prompted, I think, by Commissioner Scar here. This has been super productive, and I think has been illuminating for all of us, maybe well beyond answering Commissioner Scar's questions. From my chair and from the STF standpoint, taking on this piece of scope that we're talking about, we want to be very deliberate and sober in our assessment of that workload and be clear about responsibilities. I think particularly for answering questions related to the lease and working with Michelle to honor the great work that Dennis had done in the past. but also projected into the future that as this project grows in momentum, that work will probably grow and sort of morph as well. And so we want to be as deliberate as we can with this group in discussions about what that responsibility looks like, so that we and you are well prepared for how that looks and feels.
And Sean, you had your hand up real quick, and then we'll try to wrap up here.
Sure. I would probably say this to John Paul when we meet on the phones, on the phone each week, but you've got, working half-time myself, I know what capacity looks like. And as you are asking for support from the partners, one thing to think about is what expertise can each of the organizations provide? Not just money, but who has expertise in marketing, who has expertise in communications, finance, and other things that there might be staff time available to help. So that could be part of the ask.
Yeah, a lot of that is easier for some of us using staff rather than handing money over, especially in this particular moment. So I think that we're not at a place to make a decision today about budget and finance. And this has been super helpful in clarifying. Peter and I will huddle in the morning and get you guys that one pager, but we'll also have a larger dialogue about bringing us all back together. And I'll probably grab and pick Jennifer's brain there too, and maybe grab Carmen and just see if there's a facilitated conversation we can have really quick to just spend some time on this conversation together and make sure that we can give you, John Paul and Giles, the clear direction and the green light. And then, you've done a really great job at creating a structure that could support us, but do we need to revisit that? Do we need to think about that? Do we need to think differently about how we can bring resources to support that? Not necessarily the way that it is. And maybe there's another, I heard once there's 10,000 ways to get to the same destination and none of them are wrong. so maybe we need to spend more time as STIA, I think, on that. So let me huddle with Peter and convene with Jennifer and Carmen from Oregon Solutions and just kind of see what we might be able to do to help us get a little bit stronger. I feel like we're at a very pivotal historical moment, and this capacity and this funding is coming at us, and we need to make sure we're strong enough to be able to support it, to carry it beyond all of us. So that work for you guys? I'll get something out to you by the end of the week, one way or the other. I'll get you the one pager sooner than that, but the next steps I'll get out to you in the next couple of days.
Lisa, can I close with a quick ask? If you have any feedback on the strategy I presented, please let me know. I'd like to hear it. And if there's anything that needs to be added or revisited in order to give a full-throated support of STF's ask to Washington and Tillamook counties, please let me know. I see that as an incredibly valuable role right now of our STIA members.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, getting that money going forward will help us. We just need to get our act a little bit better together to to help you. So if you can send out the slides to everybody, John Paul, that would help so they can go back through them and look at them with a different lens.
Okay, will do.
All right, you guys, thanks. Sorry we ran over. Thank you for the great conversation. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. I'm getting caught up.
Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Scar.